My name is Tasha. I am 32 years old, and I am a registered nurse working the graveyard shift at Grady Memorial Hospital. I spend 12 hours a night on my feet, wiping brows, checking vitals, and holding the hands of strangers so they do not have to be alone in the dark. I am the one who fixes things. I am the one who pays the bills. And last Christmas, I learned that while I was busy saving lives, my own family was busy stealing mine. I arrived at my mother's house 20 minutes late, still wearing my royal blue scrubs, because the ER had been a war zone and I did not have time to change. The smell of hospital sanitizer still clung to my skin, a sharp contrast to the aroma of rosemary roasted turkey and expensive perfume filling my mother's dining room. My younger sister Keisha sat at the head of the table, looking like a magazine cover in a shimmering red silk dress that cost more than my car note. Her husband Brad was pouring vintage wine, his gold cufflinks catching the light of the chandelier. They looked like royalty. I looked like the help. My mother, Mama Joyce, barely looked up from her plate when I walked in. "You are late," she said, her voice tight. "We almost started without you. Sit down and fix your face. Your Aunt V is calling in 5 minutes." I sat in the folding chair they had squeezed into the corner, feeling the familiar ache in my lower back. I kept my mouth shut. I always kept my mouth shut. I just wanted to get through dinner, hand out my gifts, and go home to sleep. When the iPad rang, Mama Joyce propped it up against the centerpiece. Aunt V's face filled the screen, pixelated but radiant from her apartment in Paris. She waved her wrists dripping with bracelets. "Merry Christmas to my favorite girls," she chirped. Everyone put on their best fake smiles. Keisha leaned in, showing off her diamond earrings. Brad waved his wine glass. I just tiredly waved a hand from the back. "Did you get my packages?" Aunt V asked, her eyes scanning the room. "I sent them 2 months ago." Keisha held up a designer purse. "I love it, Auntie Mama." Joyce pointed to a new silk scarf around her neck. But when Aunt V looked at me, her smile faltered slightly. "Tasha, baby, what about you? Did you get your envelope?" I reached into my pocket and pulled out the only thing I had received. It was a small plastic keychain shaped like the Eiffel Tower. It looked like something you would buy at a dollar store. I forced a smile, trying not to look disappointed. "Yes, Aunt V. Thank you. I put it on my car keys immediately. It is really cute." The room went quiet. On the screen, Aunt V stopped smiling. She lowered her wine glass slowly. Her brow furrowed in confusion. "A keychain." "Tasha, what are you talking about?" I held it up to the camera lens. "The keychain. The little tower." Aunt V's voice dropped an octave, turning ice cold. "That keychain was a freebie from the leasing office, Tasha. It was attached to the welcome packet. I did not send you a keychain. I sent you the deed and the keys to a 2-bedroom condo in downtown Atlanta, a fully paid-off property worth $500,000. I sent the certified mail to your mother's house because I knew you were working double shifts." The silence that followed was so heavy it felt like it sucked the air out of the room. My hand, still holding the cheap piece of plastic, started to tremble. I looked at the keychain. Then I looked at my mother. Mama Joyce dropped her fork. It hit the fine china with a sound like a gunshot. Next to her, Brad suddenly found the bottom of his wine glass very interesting, downing the rest of the red liquid in one large gulp. Keisha's face drained of color, turning as white as the linen napkin in her lap. "Where is it?" My voice sounded strange, raspy, like I had swallowed glass. "Mama, where's the package?" Mama Joyce let out a nervous, high-pitched laugh. She waved her hand at the iPad. "Oh, V, you are confusing the poor girl. You know how the mail is these days. Things get lost. Besides, you probably just thought about buying it but forgot. You are getting older. Your memory is not what it used to be." "Excuse me." Aunt V's voice crackled with static and rage. "My memory is just fine, Joyce. I tracked that package. It was signed for by Brad Miller 8 weeks ago." I turned my eyes to Brad, the charming, smooth-talking real estate agent who always made jokes about my beat-up Honda Civic. He refused to meet my gaze. "Tasha, look, Mama," Joyce cut in, her voice hardening, shifting from nervous to authoritative. We did not want to overwhelm you. You are so busy with work, and you know you are not good with financial paperwork. We were just holding it for safekeeping until the right time. Safekeeping. I stood up my chair, scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. Safekeeping usually implies that you actually tell the owner you have it. You have had the keys to a $500,000 home for 2 months, and you gave me a plastic keychain. Sit down, Tasha, Keisha snapped, slamming her hand on the table. You are making a scene. You are ruining Christmas. God, you are always so dramatic. I am dramatic, I laughed, but there was no humor in it. I looked around the room, really seeing it for the first time. I realized that the chandelier above our heads, the food on the table, the roof we were sitting under, I had paid for all of it. For 5 years, I had handed over half my paycheck to Mama Joyce because she said her pension wasn't enough. I lived in a studio apartment the size of a shoebox while they lived here on my dime. I turned back to the iPad. Aunt V, they stole it. They hid it from me. That is enough. Mama Joyce stood up, her face twisting into a scowl. I will not have you disrespecting me in my own house, Tasha. Brad and Keisha needed a place to store some inventory for Brad's business. The apartment was empty. It was just sitting there. You are single. You are rarely home. What do you need 2 bedrooms for? To sleep in between shifts. Keisha is a married woman. She has appearances to maintain. We made an executive decision for the good of the family. For the good of the family. The phrase hung in the air like smoke. It was the same phrase she used when she made me co-sign Keisha's student loans. The same phrase she used when she needed money for the roof repair. It is my name on the deed, Mama. I said, my voice shaking with a mix of exhaustion and fury. Not Keisha's. Mine. Keisha scoffed, rolling her eyes. Oh, please. You think you are better than us just because Aunt V pities you? She only gave you that place because you have no husband and no life. But guess what? You cannot afford the HOA fees anyway. You would just lose it in a year. We were doing you a favor. I looked at Aunt V on the screen, who looked ready to climb through the internet and strangle someone. Joyce, if Tasha does not have those keys in her hand in 5 minutes, I'm calling the police. Don't you dare threaten me, Mama, Joyce hissed, reaching out and ending the call. The screen went black. The lifeline was cut. Now look what you did, Mama Joyce spat at me, pointing a manicured finger in my face. You got your aunt all worked up. You are selfish, Tasha. You have always been selfish. You come in here with your dirty work clothes smelling like sickness, and you tear this family apart over a condo. Brad stood up, then buttoning his suit jacket, composing himself. He put a hand on my shoulder, his grip tight and patronizing. Tasha, look, you are tired. You are not thinking clearly. You are hysterical. Why don't you go home and sleep it off? We can discuss this like adults tomorrow. He was steering me toward the door. My own brother-in-law was kicking me out of my mother's house. Give me the keys, Brad, I said, digging my heels in. Go home, Tasha. Mama, Joyce yelled. Get out of my house until you learn how to be grateful. Brad shoved me just a little, but it was enough to stumble me out onto the front porch. He slammed the heavy oak door in my face. I heard the lock click. I stood there in the freezing December air, the wind cutting through my thin scrubs. Through the window I could see them. Mama Joyce was pouring more wine. Keisha was checking her reflection in a spoon. Brad was laughing. They went right back to their dinner. They thought it was over. They thought I would go home, cry into my pillow, and accept my place as the family doormat like I always did. I looked down at the plastic Eiffel Tower keychain still clutched in my hand. The sharp plastic edge dug into my palm until it bled. I did not cry. For the first time in my life, I did not feel like crying. I felt cold. I felt clear. I walked to my beat-up car, got in, and locked the doors. I did not turn the ignition. Instead, I picked up my phone. I was not going to sleep. I was going to war. I did not go home. I could not go home. My studio apartment was a place where I survived, but it was not a place where I could think. My hands were shaking so hard against the steering wheel that I had to pull over twice just to breathe. I tried calling Aunt V again, but it went straight to voicemail. It was probably the middle of the night in Paris, or maybe Mama Joyce had already called her with some twisted version of the truth. I sat in the dark parking lot of a 24-hour diner, the engine idling, racking my brain. The Onyx. That was the name Aunt V had mentioned once during a FaceTime call months ago. She said it was the crown jewel of downtown Atlanta living. I put the car in gear and drove toward the skyline. It was 2 a.m. when I pulled up to the Onyx. The building was a towering structure of glass and steel that reflected the city lights like a dark mirror. It screamed money. It screamed the kind of life I had never allowed myself to dream of. I parked my rusted Honda Civic 2 blocks away because I knew the valet would look at it with disdain. I walked to the entrance, the cold wind whipping through my thin scrubs, making me shiver violently. The lobby was warmer than my entire apartment. It smelled of white tea and expensive leather. A concierge with a jawline sharp enough to cut glass stood behind a marble desk. He looked up as I approached, his eyes scanning my worn-out sneakers and my blue hospital uniform. He did not smile. "Can I help you, miss?" He asked, his tone suggesting that the only way I could help was by leaving. "Deliveries are around the back." "I am not a delivery driver," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "My name is Tasha. My aunt Vivian Banks purchased a unit in this building. I am here to pick up my keys." The concierge raised an eyebrow. He typed something into his computer, his movements slow and deliberate. "Vivian Banks. Yes, she is listed as the purchaser for the penthouse suite, Unit 12B. However, our records show the unit is currently occupied by the residents she designated." Occupied. The word hit me like a physical blow. "Who is occupying it?" He turned the screen slightly away from me, protecting the privacy of people who had stolen my life. "Mr. and Mrs. Miller. They moved in 7 weeks ago. Mr. and Mrs. Miller. Brad and Keisha." My knees felt weak. "Are you sure?" I asked, desperate for there to be a mistake. "I am quite sure, miss. In fact, Mr. Miller just pulled into the garage a few minutes ago. He drives the silver Mercedes G-Wagon, correct? We just logged him in." The room spun. A Mercedes G-Wagon. Brad drove a 5-year-old sedan. Keisha didn't even have a job. They didn't just steal the apartment. They were leveraging it. They were spending money they did not have, living a fantasy life on property that legally belonged to me. "Can I see the footage?" I asked. "Please. I just need to know." The concierge sighed, perhaps sensing the desperation radiating off me. He turned the monitor. There, on the grainy black and white feed of the parking garage, was Brad. He was stepping out of a brand-new gleaming SUV. He looked like a king surveying his kingdom. He was laughing into his phone. He was living in my house, driving a car bought with my equity, while I was standing in the lobby shivering in cheap scrubs. I thanked the man, turned around, and walked out into the cold night. I finally had the truth, and it was colder than the wind. I did not sleep. I sat in my car outside my mother's house until the sun came up, watching the windows turn from black to orange as the morning light hit them. At 7:00 a.m., I used my key to open the front door. The house was quiet. The smell of stale wine and turkey from the night before still hung in the air. I walked into the living room. The fireplace was cold, but something white caught my eye in the ashes. I knelt down. It was paper. Half-burned, shredded paper. I reached in my fingers, turning black with soot, and pulled out a fragment. It was heavy legal stock paper. I could make out the letterhead of a prestigious law firm in Paris. And on another scrap in handwriting, I recognized instantly were the words, "For Tasha, my deed of gift." They hadn't just lost the mail. They had intercepted it. They had opened it, read it, and then burned it. Tasha. I spun around. Mama Joyce was standing in the doorway in her silk robe, holding a cup of coffee. She didn't look guilty. She looked annoyed. "You burned it," I whispered, holding up the charred paper. "You burned the deed." Mama Joyce took a sip of her coffee, her face impassive. "I was cleaning up," she said casually. "We couldn't have that lying around. You know how Brad is about clutter." Clutter, I stood up, ash falling from my hands onto her pristine rug. That was a legal document, Mama. That was a gift from Aunt V to me. How could you? She walked over to the sofa and sat down, crossing her legs. Sit down, Tasha. Stop looming over me. We did what we had to do. Keisha just got married. Do you know how much pressure is on that girl Brad is trying to get his investment firm off the ground? They needed collateral. They needed an address that impressed clients. You are a nurse. You wear scrubs. You don't need a penthouse to impress sick people. So you gave them my house. We didn't give them anything, she said, sounding bored. Brad just used a power of attorney to handle the paperwork. Since you were unavailable, I was working, and I never signed a power of attorney, Mama. Joyce waved a hand dismissively. Oh, don't get technical. You signed a bunch of papers when we refinanced this house last year to help me out. Maybe a form got mixed in. Brad is very thorough. He said it was just a temporary arrangement to help them cash flow some investments. They will move out in a year or two. A year or two? A year or two of them living in my home, destroying my credit while I pay rent on a shoebox. I felt tears pricking my eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness anymore. They were tears of pure, unadulterated rage. Why, Mama? Why do you always choose her? I have paid your bills for 5 years. I bought you this car. I paid for the roof over your head. Why do you hate me? Mama? Joyce set her coffee cup down hard. The liquid sloshed over the rim. I do not hate you, Tasha. I am realistic. And then she said the words that would haunt me forever, the words that finally severed the cord between us. Look at you, Tasha. You are strong. You are a cactus. You can survive in the desert without water. You can take a beating and keep standing. But Keisha is an orchid. She is delicate. She needs a greenhouse. She needs special lighting and constant water, or she will wither and die. I have to protect the orchid. The cactus can take care of itself. I stared at her. I was a cactus. That was her justification for 30 years of neglect. Because I didn't complain, because I didn't break, I didn't deserve care. And if I call the police, I asked quietly. If I report Brad for fraud, for forgery, Mama Joyce's eyes narrowed into slits. Then you will destroy this family. Brad will lose his license. He will go to jail. Keisha will be destitute. And I will never forgive you. You will be the daughter who sent her brother-in-law to prison. Is that who you want to be? The villain? She knew exactly where to hit me. She knew my greatest weakness was my desire to be good, to be the dutiful daughter. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, my sooty fingers smudging the screen. It was a text from Brad. Look, Tasha, let's be reasonable. I know you found out. I can't move out right now. It would ruin my image with investors. I will send you $500 a month. Consider it rent. It is more than you make in a week. Take it or leave it. Don't make this ugly. $500. For a penthouse that could rent for $5,000. He wasn't offering me rent. He was offering me hush money. And he was insulting me while doing it. I looked at the text. Then I looked at my mother, who was calmly sipping her coffee again, confident that she had manipulated me into submission once more. She thought the conversation was over. She thought the cactus would just absorb the heat and stay silent. But she forgot one thing about cacti. They have thorns. I didn't say another word. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I simply turned around and walked out of the house. I walked past the photos of Keisha on the mantel. I walked past the car I paid for. I walked out the door and into the morning sun. I was alone. I had no mother, no sister, no family. But as I sat in my car and looked at the text from Brad one last time, I realized something else. I had nothing left to lose. And that made me dangerous. I hit reply, but I didn't type a message. I just typed 2 words. Offer declined. Then I started the car. It was time to call Aunt V back. It was time to stop being a daughter and start being a plaintiff. I sat in my car for a long time, watching the offer declined message blinking on my screen. My thumb hovered over the send button, but then I stopped. I deleted the words. Aunt V's voice echoed in my head, a memory from when I was 12 years old and crying because a boy at school stole my lunch money. She had wiped my face with a silk handkerchief and said, "Tasha, tears are for grieving. Strategy is for winning. Do not cry when you can calculate the bill." She was right. If I fought them openly now, Mama Joyce would paint me as the jealous sister. Brad would use his lawyers to drag this out for years, draining my savings while he lived in my house for free. I needed to be smarter. I needed to be the doormat they thought I was, just long enough to pull the rug out from under them. I dialed Aunt V back. She answered on the first ring, ready to scream, but I cut her off. "Do not come home yet," I said, my voice calm and terrifyingly steady. "I need you to stay in Paris. I need you to go to your lawyer and get the original wet ink copy of the trust deed and the transfer documents, the ones Brad forged." "But Tasha," she argued, "I can have the police there in an hour." "No police yet," I said. "If we arrest him now, he claims it was a misunderstanding. He claims Mama gave him verbal permission. I need him to admit it. I need him to hang himself. Trust me." I hung up and took a deep breath. Then I typed a new text to Brad. I made sure to sound defeated, small and pathetic. I wrote, "You win. I cannot afford a lawyer, and I do not want to upset Mama. I will take the $500. But please, can we just sign a paper so I know you will actually pay me? I have bills to pay." The response came in 3 seconds. A row of laughing emojis followed by smart girl. "Come over Saturday night. We are having a few friends over to warm up the place. You can sign it then." They thought I was surrendering. They had no idea I was just loading the gun. Saturday night arrived, and I walked into the Onyx not as the owner, but as a guest in my own home. The elevator ride to the 12th floor felt like an eternity. When the doors opened, the bass of hip-hop music thumped against my chest. The apartment door was open. My apartment. I stepped inside, and the air smelled of expensive cologne and catered shrimp. The space was breathtaking, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Atlanta skyline. But they had already ruined it. Keisha's tacky faux fur throws were draped over the modern furniture Aunt V had picked out. Coasters were scattered everywhere. Keisha spotted me from across the room. She was wearing a white dress holding a champagne flute, looking every bit the lady of the manor. "Oh, look who finally decided to show up," she announced loudly. "Everyone, this is my sister, Tasha. She is a nurse, so if anyone passes out from the drinks, she can revive you." The guests laughed. I forced a smile and walked over. Keisha shoved an empty tray into my hands. "Since you are here, can you refill the appetizers? The caterer is running slow and you know where the kitchen is." She did not even ask. She just assumed I would serve her. And I did. I walked into my own kitchen, a kitchen I had never cooked in, and started arranging crab cakes on a platter. Through the pass-through window, I watched them. Mama Joyce was on the balcony telling a group of women how proud she was of Brad's success. Brad was at the bar pouring shots. He came over to me a few minutes later, smelling of bourbon. He leaned in close, his hot breath against my ear. "I am glad you came to your senses, Tasha. See, this is better. You get a little extra cash. Keisha gets her dream start. Everyone wins. You are a good sister." He patted my shoulder like I was a dog that had finally learned to sit. "I need to use the restroom," I said, keeping my head down. I walked down the hallway past the guest bathroom and slipped into the study. This was supposed to be my second bedroom, my sanctuary. Now it was Brad's office. I closed the door softly and locked it. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I had 3 minutes before someone noticed I was gone. I went straight to the mahogany desk. It was covered in papers. I started rifling through them, my hands shaking. Invoices for a leased BMW, credit card bills with overdue notices, and then under a stack of sports magazines I found it. A folder marked HELOC, Home Equity Line of Credit. I opened it and felt the blood drain from my face. Brad wasn't just living here. He had taken out a line of credit against the value of the condo. He had forged my signature again to borrow $100,000 using the apartment as collateral. The withdrawal dates were from last week. The money was already gone, likely funneled into his failing investment schemes. He was stripping the copper out of the walls before he even owned the building. This wasn't just squatting. This was grand larceny. I took photos of every page with my phone, my hands steadying with every shutter click. I had him. I unlocked the door and rejoined the party just as Brad was making a toast. To family, he shouted, raising his glass. And to knowing your place in it? I walked right up to him. I was still holding the serving tray under one arm, playing the part. Brad, I said, my voice cutting through the chatter. I brought the agreement for the rent money. Can we sign it now? I have a double shift tomorrow. Brad rolled his eyes, annoyed that I interrupted his moment. Fine. You are so desperate for that check, aren't you? I pulled a folded document from my scrub pocket. I had typed it up on my break at the hospital. It looked like a standard, poorly written personal loan agreement. It was full of simple words, the kind a simple nurse would write. He grabbed a pen, barely glancing at the paper. You just need to initial here and sign at the bottom, I pointed. The document was a trap disguised as stupidity. Paragraph 1 stated he would pay $500. But paragraph 4, buried in a dense block of text about late fees, read, borrower acknowledges that the property is legally owned by Tasha Williams and that the borrower assumed occupancy and obtained financing without the owner's consent or signature on any previous transfer documents. It was a confession. If he signed this, he was admitting that he knew he didn't own the house and that he had committed fraud to get the loans. Brad laughed, looking at the paper. God, Tasha, did you write this yourself? It is so amateur. Borrower agrees to pay. You sound like a first-year law student who failed the bar. Just sign it, Brad, so I can get my money, I said, making my voice whine a little. He shook his head, arrogant to the bone. He didn't read it. He didn't even skim it. He just saw me, the nurse in the cheap scrubs, and assumed I was too dumb to trick him. He scribbled his signature with a flourish. There. Happy now, get out of here, you are depressing the vibe. I took the paper. I folded it neatly and placed it in my pocket right next to the phone containing the photos of the bank fraud. I felt lighter than I had in years. I walked to the door. Keisha yelled from the couch. You are leaving. There are still dishes in the sink. I stopped and turned around. The music seemed to fade away. I looked at Keisha sitting on my sofa, spilling wine on my rug. I looked at Mama Joyce, ignoring me as usual. And I looked at Brad, smug and victorious. I am not doing the dishes, Keisha, I said, my voice carrying across the silent room. She scoffed. Why not? Because I have to go meet a locksmith, I said. Brad frowned. A locksmith? What is wrong with your apartment door? I smiled, and this time it was a real smile. A sharp, dangerous smile. Nothing is wrong with my apartment door, Brad. Yet. I opened the front door and stepped out into the hallway. Enjoy the party, I whispered to the closing door. It is the last one you will ever have. As the latch clicked shut, I pulled out my phone and dialed the number I had saved for this exact moment. It was not Aunt V. It was the sheriff's department. Phase 1 was complete. Now it was time for the eviction. 2 weeks later, I sat in my car across the street from the Onyx, watching people stream into the lobby. A large professional sign stood on the sidewalk. It read, Open House Luxury Penthouse, Immediate Move in Cash Offers Preferred. Brad was not just living in my apartment anymore. He was trying to sell it. He had realized that he could not keep up the charade forever, so he had decided to cash out. He was going to sell the property for a quick $400,000, pocket the money, and disappear before the deed transfer could be challenged in court. It was bold. It was reckless. And it was exactly what I was waiting for. I watched a nice older couple walk in holding a flyer. They looked like the perfect victims. They probably had a retirement nest egg ready to be handed over to a con artist. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Aunt V. We are in the elevator. It is showtime. I took a deep breath. I checked my mirror. I was not wearing scrubs today. I was wearing a black suit, sharp and tailored. I looked like a woman who owned things. I got out of the car and walked toward the building. The doorman tried to stop me again, but this time I did not stop. I walked right past him like I owned the place. Because I did. When I reached the 12th floor, the door to my apartment was propped open. Inside, the place was buzzing. There were at least 20 people wandering around, touching the walls, admiring the view. Brad was in the center of the living room holding court. He was wearing his best suit, flashing his white teeth, charming the older couple I had seen earlier. "This unit is unique," Brad was saying, his voice smooth as silk. "We have had a lot of interest, so if you want to lock it in, we are accepting deposits today. It is a steal at this price." Mama Joyce was there too, sitting on the white sofa, acting like the Queen Mother. She was nodding enthusiastically, telling another potential buyer, "Oh yes, my son-in-law is a genius with real estate. He has such an eye for value." I stood in the doorway for a moment, just watching them. They looked so happy. They looked so comfortable selling my future to the highest bidder. Brad reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a contract. The older man reached for his checkbook. The pen hovered over the paper. "Do not sign that check," I said, my voice ringing out clear and loud across the room. The chatter stopped instantly. Every head turned. Brad looked up, annoyance flashing across his face until he saw who it was. "Tasha." He laughed nervously, trying to play it off for the clients. "Folks, this is my sister-in-law. She is a bit of a jokester. Tasha, we are in the middle of business here." "Why do you not go grab some punch in the kitchen?" "I am not here for punch, Brad," I said, stepping further into the room. "And neither are they." I stepped aside. Behind me, 2 uniformed sheriff deputies stepped into the frame. And walking between them, looking like an avenging angel in a Chanel suit, was Aunt V. The color drained from Mama Joyce's face so fast she looked like a ghost. She stood up, her hands trembling. "V, what are you doing here? I thought you were in Paris." Aunt V did not even look at her sister. She walked straight into the center of the room, her heels clicking sharply on the hardwood. She looked around the apartment with a look of absolute disgust. She pointed a manicured finger at the crystal chandelier hanging above the dining table. "That chandelier cost $5,000, she said, her voice cold and commanding. "Tasha, do you want to keep it when we throw this trash out, or should we just burn everything and start over?" Brad stepped forward, his hands raised in a panic. "Now wait a minute. Who are you? You cannot just barge in here. This is my property. Officers, remove these people." One of the deputies stepped forward. His hand rested on his holster. "Are you Brad Miller?" "Yes, I am Brad Miller, and I demand you." "Brad Miller," the deputy interrupted, pulling a folded warrant from his belt. "You are under arrest for federal mail fraud, wire fraud, forgery in the first degree, and grand larceny." The room erupted in gasps. The older couple grabbed their checkbook and backed away. "Arrest," Brad screamed, his voice cracking. "That is insane. I have the deed. I have the paperwork. This is a misunderstanding. My mother-in-law gave me permission. Tell them, Joyce." He spun around to look at Mama Joyce, but she was paralyzed, mouth open, unable to speak. The deputy grabbed Brad's wrist and spun him around, slamming him against the wall. "You have the right to remain silent." "No," Brad yelled, struggling against the cuffs. "I have a contract. Tasha signed a rental agreement," she acknowledged. "I was the landlord. She signed it." I walked forward calmly. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the crumpled piece of paper Brad had signed at the party. The one he had been too arrogant to read. "Is this the paper you are talking about, Brad?" I asked, holding it up. He stared at it wild-eyed. "Yes." "Show them. It proves I am in charge." I turned to the sheriff. "Actually, Sheriff, this document is a signed confession. In paragraph 4, Mr. Miller acknowledges that he knowingly intercepted the deed, forged my signature, and took out a fraudulent line of credit without the owner's consent. He signed it right here." I pointed to his signature scrawled in blue ink. Brad stared at the paper. He squinted. He read the fine print. And then his knees buckled. He realized that his own arrogance had been the noose around his neck. "You tricked me," he whispered. "You set me up." "I did not trick you, Brad," I said coldly. "I just let you be yourself. A thief who thinks he is smarter than everyone else." The deputies hauled him up. As they dragged him toward the door past the horrified buyers, he started screaming. It was Keisha. She made me do it. She wanted the house. It was her idea. Keisha, who had been hiding in the kitchen, ran out, tears streaming down her face, mascara running everywhere. "You liar," she screamed. "Mama, tell them we just borrowed it," she ran to Mama. Joyce grabbing her arm. "Mama, do something. They are taking Brad." "Mama." Joyce finally snapped out of her trance. She rushed toward Aunt V, grabbing her hand desperately. "V, please, you cannot do this. He is family. He is Keisha's husband. It was just a mistake. They are young. They did not mean any harm. Please call off the police. We can fix this." Aunt V pulled her hand away as if she had been burned. She looked at her sister with a sadness that was deeper than anger. "Fix it," Aunt V asked quietly. "Like you fixed the college fund I sent for Tasha 10 years ago. The money that mysteriously disappeared right before Keisha got her first car." "Mama." Joyce froze. "I knew, Joyce." Aunt V continued, her voice shaking with suppressed rage. "I always knew. I sent you money every month to make sure Tasha had food while she was in nursing school. And every month, you told me she was fine while she was eating instant noodles and working 2 jobs. You took everything I gave to her and you gave it to Keisha. You have been stealing from one daughter to feed the other for 20 years. "That is not true, Mama," Joyce stammered, but she could not meet Aunt V's eyes. "It ends today," Aunt V said. "Tasha is not your bank account anymore. And neither am I. I have already spoken to my lawyers. The trust fund I set up for you, it is frozen. The allowance canceled. If you want to support your golden child, you can get a job." Mama Joyce looked like she had been slapped. She looked at me, her eyes pleading. "Tasha, baby, please, talk to your aunt. We are family. You cannot let them take Brad. You cannot let your sister be homeless." I looked at my mother. I looked at the woman who told me I was a cactus because she was too lazy to water me. I looked at Keisha, who was sobbing on the floor not because she was sorry, but because she had lost. "You are right, Mama," I said, my voice completely steady. "Keisha is an orchid. She is very delicate." I walked over to the door and held it open. "So you better get her out of here before the locks get changed. It is going to be a cold night," Keisha screamed. "Get out!" I yelled, and the sound of my own voice startled me. It was not the voice of a doormat. It was the voice of the owner. "Get out of my house." The deputies dragged Brad into the elevator. Keisha scrambled up, grabbing 2 suitcases that were by the door, running after her husband, terrified of being left behind. Mama Joyce stood alone in the middle of the room, looking small and old. She looked at me one last time, waiting for me to crack, waiting for the guilt to kick in. But I felt nothing. "Go," I said, pointing to the door. She turned and walked out, her shoulders slumped, defeated. The door clicked shut. The silence that followed was heavy, but it was not empty. It was peaceful. I looked at Aunt V. She was wiping a single tear from her cheek. She walked over to me and pulled a set of keys from her purse. The real keys. "Welcome home, Tasha," she whispered. I took the keys. The metal was cool in my hand. I walked to the window and looked down. I saw a police car flashing its lights. I saw Brad being shoved into the back seat. I saw Keisha and Mama Joyce standing on the curb, bewildered and lost. I turned away from the window. I looked at the chandelier. It really was beautiful. And for the first time in my life, I did not feel like I had to apologize for owning it. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of my new life. It smelled like freedom, and it tasted like justice. 3 months later, the sunrise looks different from the 12th floor. I am sitting on my balcony, wrapped in a cashmere blanket, drinking coffee that actually costs more than $1. Below me, the city of Atlanta is waking up, but up here it is quiet. It is safe. The first thing I did after the police took them away was change the locks. Then I installed a state-of-the-art security system with cameras covering every inch of the hallway. I do not need them for burglars. I need them for relatives. News travels fast in a family, even when you stop talking to them. I heard from a cousin that Brad took a plea deal. He is currently serving 3 years in a federal facility for wire fraud. His real estate license is gone forever. But the real tragedy is what happened to the enablers. Mama Joyce had to sell the big house, the house I paid for, to cover Brad's legal fees and restitution. She lost everything trying to save the son-in-law who used her. Now she and Keisha are living in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment on the south side. The golden child has lost her shine. Keisha had to get a job. She is working as a cashier at a discount grocery store, scanning coupons for people she used to look down on. They are back to square one, miserable and blaming the world for their bad choices. But they are not my problem anymore. I am not the fixer. I am just Tasha. My phone buzzed on the glass table. I glanced at it. It was a text from a number I had deleted but recognized instantly. It was Mama Joyce. The message read, "You are cruel, Tasha. How could you do this to us? We are family. You ruined everything." I stared at the words. The old Tasha, the one who craved validation, would have typed a paragraph back. She would have apologized or tried to explain that she was the victim. But the new Tasha, I did not feel a thing. I did not feel anger. I did not feel guilt. I just felt bored. I did not type a response. I simply pressed the button that said, "Block contact." The message disappeared. The link was severed. Forever. I stood up and walked back inside my beautiful silent home. I walked over to the wall by the entrance. There, framed in a shadow box, hanging like a piece of modern art, was the plastic Eiffel Tower keychain. The $1 piece of junk that started a war. It was cheap and ugly, but to me it was the most valuable thing in the house. I touched the glass gently. People always say that blood is thicker than water, but they forget that blood can also stain. Family is not DNA. Family is not the people who share your last name. Family are the people who do not steal your future to fund their fantasies. Family are the people who protect you, not the ones you need protection from. I smiled at the keychain. It turns out the price of freedom is not $500,000. The price of freedom is just a $1 keychain, provided you know how to use it to unlock the truth.